Once upon a time, in a hidden valley surrounded by snow-capped mountains, there was a mysterious village called Virelia. The villagers were peaceful people who rarely left their land, and outsiders rarely found their way in. This isolation wasn't just by chance. Virelia had a secret that kept it untouched by time. A glowing tree at its center that granted strange powers to those who touched its roots. A 17-year-old girl named Aria lived in the village with her grandfather, who was once the keeper of the tree. Aria had always been curious about the tree, but it was forbidden for anyone under 21 to approach it. Every evening, her grandfather told her stories about ancient guardians, strange storms that could freeze time, and a war that almost destroyed the tree many generations ago. One stormy night, lightning struck near the village and the ground shook. The next morning, the villagers found that the tree had dimmed for the first time in centuries. Panic spread quickly. The village elders called a secret council. Aria, hiding behind thick curtains, overheard them say that the tree was dying because something from the outside world had awakened. That same night, a stranger arrived at the village border barely alive, covered in wounds, and carrying a map that matched the markings on the tree's roots. Aria saw him being carried into the healing tent and felt a strange pull, like her heartbeat was in sync with the stranger's presence. Days passed. The stranger, whose name was Kale, recovered slowly. Aria visited him in secret, asking questions about the map. Kale told her he was searching for the other half of the heart root, the magical seed believed to be hidden far beyond the known world, capable of either reviving the tree or destroying it completely. Despite the risk, Aria decided to leave the village with Kale. She believed her destiny was tied to the tree, and something deep inside her told her this journey would change everything. They left before dawn, following ancient trails carved into mountains, crossing frozen rivers, escaping shadowy creatures that seemed drawn to Kale's map. They reached an abandoned temple, half buried in sand, where the walls whispered warnings in voices only Aria could hear. Kale revealed more. He wasn't just a wanderer. He was once part of a secret order, sworn to protect the heart root. But years ago, the order was betrayed by one of its own, who stole half of the heart root and vanished. That betrayal had caused the balance of magic to shift and led to the weakening of the tree. As Aria and Kale continued their journey through deserts, jungles, and forgotten cities, Aria began to change. She would sometimes hear trees whispering her name, or feel warmth in her hands when danger approached. Kale noticed it too. He began to believe that Aria might be more than just the granddaughter of a keeper. She might be the verdant flame, a figure from legend meant to awaken the full power of the heart root. They finally reached the Isle of Wormglass, said to be the resting place of the other half of the heart root. But standing in their way was the betrayer himself, now a twisted sorcerer known as Malric, who had fused with the stolen heart root piece and become something inhuman. The final battle was brutal. Aria faced Malric alone as Kale was gravely injured, using all the strength within her and the whispers of every forest and mountain she had passed. She called upon the full power of the tree. She didn't fight with fire or swords, but with growth, memory, and light. The earth itself rose to bind Malrik, and as she joined both halves of the heartroot, a brilliant light surged across the world. The tree in Virelia bloomed with golden leaves once more, and time itself seemed to pause in awe. Aria returned to Virelia, no longer a curious girl, but the new guardian of the tree, with Cale at her side. And far away, in a cave untouched by time, a new seed quietly pulsed with light, waiting for the next story to begin. Months had passed since Aria restored the heartroot, and Virelia had begun to flourish like never before. Flowers that had once only bloomed in legend now colored the hills. Birds long thought extinct returned, singing songs in unfamiliar melodies. But amidst the beauty, Aria began having dreams strange. Vivid dreams of voices calling her from beneath the roots of the heart tree. One night, she followed the whispers in her dream and woke up beneath the great glowing canopy. The roots had shifted, revealing a hidden chamber beneath the soil. The chamber pulsed with faint light, and in its center was a smaller seed. Unlike the heartroot, this one was dark and translucent, beating slowly like a heart. Cale and the village elders were summoned. The oldest elder, known only as Mira, trembled when she saw it. "It's the seed of echoes," she said, her voice dry with fear. "A seed of memory and time. If it grows, it can show us the truth or consume it." Aria felt drawn to it. Against the warnings of the council, she decided to plant it in the far hills, where no magic had grown for centuries. As soon as the seed touched the earth, the sky above shimmered, and a rippling wave spread through the ground. Time in the village shifted. Children spoke in tongues they never learned. Elders remembered things that hadn't happened yet. Cale began experiencing flickers of alternate realities, ones where he had never met Aria, or where Malrik had succeeded and the world had turned to ash. Aria herself began to see people from the past, walking through the village, like ghosts. Unaware they were no longer alive, the seed of echoes had connected timelines, but not all visitors were peaceful. One day, a rift opened near the hills. Out of it stepped a figure wearing armor made of obsidian and light. She called herself Rhea and claimed to be from a version of Virelia that was conquered by a dark version of Aria. She had come to destroy the seed before the cycle repeated. Cale didn't trust her, but Aria felt something familiar in Rhea, like they shared the same soul, but divided by choices. Rhea warned them, "The seed doesn't show what could be. It shows what must be prevented." But it was too late. The seed had already started to grow. A tree unlike the heartroot emerged, black bark, silver leaves, and a single fruit at the top. Mira declared that if the fruit ripened, it would merge every timeline into one, and that meant the good and the evil versions of Aria would collide. The journey began again, this time, not across lands, but across realities. Aria, Cale, and even Rhea stepped through rifts that took them to versions of Virelia where Aria was a queen, or a prisoner, or even the destroyer of the heart tree. Each version gave Aria pieces of herself she had forgotten or denied. And in each world, the tree from the seed of echoes was growing, faster and stronger. In one reality, Aria met her own mother, someone who had died in her original timeline. They talked for hours under a silver moon. Her mother warned her, "You can't save every version of yourself. Aria. But you must forgive them all. The final rift took them to the last timeline, one where Virilia was barren and only one tree stood, the echo tree, fully grown. Its fruit was glowing, pulsing, about to drop. Rhea wanted to destroy it. Cale wanted to seal it. But Aria knew this fruit held the last question. What happens when every choice you never made finally arrives at your door? She reached out, touched the fruit, and time shattered. When Aria touched the fruit of the echo tree, reality didn't just ripple, it broke. She found herself standing in a vast, infinite plain where the sky shifted between night and day in seconds, and shards of timelines floated like islands around her. Each shard showed a moment she had lived or could have lived. In one, she was never chosen by the tree. In another, she ruled over a version of the world where magic was outlawed. In one terrifying shard, she watched herself burn the heart tree to the ground. Cale and Rhea appeared beside her, but in different forms. Cale was younger, uncertain, with no memory of their journey. Rhea was older, her armor cracked, eyes tired as if she had lived this loop 1,000 times before. They weren't alone. From the darkness between the shards emerged a tall, pale figure with no face. It moved like smoke and spoke like wind across dry leaves. It called itself the Null and claimed to be the guardian of the in-between, a realm that exists between choices, born from indecision and regret. "You touched what was never meant to be touched," the Null whispered. "You opened doors no soul should open. Now you must choose a single truth or lose them all." It offered Aria a deal: surrender the fruit, and she could return to one timeline of her choosing. Everything else would be erased, every Cale, every Rhea, every version of herself. Cale begged her not to listen. Rhea, strangely, said nothing. She simply handed Aria a mirror made of shard glass and stepped back. Aria looked into the mirror and saw not just her reflection, but every version of herself: the brave, the cruel, the kind, the broken. She realized then the echo tree didn't want to destroy reality. It wanted to reveal it. It was not a curse, but a test of understanding. So she made a different choice. Aria crushed the fruit in her hand. The Null screamed, the shards trembled, and everything dissolved into white. When she awoke, she was back in Virilia. The heart tree still stood, its glow brighter than ever. But now, beside it, another tree had grown, the echo tree, balanced, calm, with leaves that shimmered between realities. Time had stabilized, but something new had begun. Rhea had vanished, her mission complete. Cale remembered everything, and Aria could now see the threads of choice in everything, every step, every word, every silence. She had become not just the guardian of the tree, but the weaver of timelines. A new era began in Virilia, an era where the past, present, and future could speak to one another, where every soul carried not just who they were but who they could have been. And in the roots of the echo tree, another seed pulsed, waiting for the next story to begin. Peace returned to Virilia, but it was not the kind of peace that silenced. It was the kind that listened. The trees hummed softly in the wind. The stars overhead moved a little differently, as if the sky itself was adjusting to the new balance Aria had brought. But the whispers didn't stop. One evening, while walking alone near the roots of the echo tree, Aria felt something shift beneath her feet. The earth cracked slightly and a roll of bark, tightly curled like an ancient scroll, pushed itself out from under a root. Aria picked it up and immediately felt her fingers tingle. It was a map, but unlike any she had ever seen. It moved, pulsed, reshaped itself every time she blinked. Lines shifted, destinations vanished, and new ones appeared. The top of the map bore one word written in glowing silver: Ilarion. She took the map to Cale, who stared at it for a long time. "I've heard this name before," he murmured. Ilarion was once said to be the first city where magic began. It was lost before even the heart tree was planted. But the map didn't show a fixed path. It showed choices. Every fork, every turn was a decision yet to be made. As Aria traced the lines, her vision blurred. She saw a towering spire, a city in the clouds, a sea made of glass. She saw herself standing before a door, covered in mirrors that reflected not her face, but her intentions. The map had a destination, but it could only be reached by choosing the correct path in the correct moment. Cale was hesitant. "You've already unraveled the weave of timelines once. If Ilarion is real, it may be where everything began and where everything could end." But Aria felt it deep within her bones. The echo tree wasn't the end of her story, it was the key that unlocked a greater journey. They prepared quietly. Only Mira, the elder, knew they were leaving. She handed Aria a small crystal vial filled with silver liquid. "Memory root," she whispered. "Drink it if you forget who you are." They followed the map across landscapes both known and new, through valleys that bent space, across bridges made of woven light, into caves where stars dripped from the ceiling like dew. Each place tested them. In one village, everyone Aria met called her by name, though she had never been there before. A child gave her a feather and said, "The sky knows." In a desert, time folded backward. Cale aged 10 years in a single night, then reversed with sunrise. At the edge of a forest of black leaves, they met a creature with a single eye and many voices. It asked riddles that weren't really questions, and gave answers that sounded like dreams. But the closer they got to Ilarion, the more Aria felt a weight pressing against her thoughts. She began forgetting details: why they started, what her name truly meant, even how she had gotten her scars. Cale grew worried, but Aria pressed on. Finally, after crossing a plain of glowing sand that sang under their feet, they stood before a great lake. In its center stood the mirrored door she had seen in her vision. No bridge, no boat, only their reflections waited for them in the water. Aria took out the vial. Her hands trembled. She drank it. In that moment, memories surged through her. Not just her own, but the memories of every Aria across every timeline. Pain, triumph, loneliness, joy. All of it, flooding her like a storm. The lake calmed. A path formed over the water, silver, silent, waiting. They walked together, Cale and Aria, toward the door. And as they reached for the handle, the sky turned upside down. The stars blinked out and the door opened not forward, but inward, to themselves, to Ilarion, to what waited within. The moment Aria and Cale stepped through the mirrored door, the world shifted not around them, but through them. It felt like falling upward, like being poured into a dream woven from memory and silence. And then, suddenly, they stood in a city unlike any they'd ever seen. Illyrian, the first city. Towering structures made of crystal and living stone, curved high into skies painted with shifting colors. Rivers floated above the streets, flowing in patterns that hummed softly, like lullabies from forgotten languages. The city seemed empty, yet not abandoned. It pulsed with a living energy, something ancient, watching. No people, no voices, but there were echoes. As they stepped forward, shadows formed near the walls, not threatening, more like traces. People made of memory, flickering in and out, repeating moments as if they were trapped in time loops. Lovers saying goodbye, children laughing, a warrior kneeling in grief. Aria realized these weren't ghosts. These were remembrances. The city remembered everything. Cale touched one of the shadow figures. For a moment, his eyes turned silver and he whispered, "They're not echoes. They're choices." The map had faded from Aria's hand. They no longer needed it. At the center of the city stood a spiraling tower taller than anything in Virelia. At its base, a wide open plaza with 12 stone pedestals, each glowing faintly. On each pedestal, a symbol. Aria recognized some symbols of time, life, shadow, light. Others were unknown. A voice spoke not aloud, but in their minds. "You have come to the heart of beginnings." It didn't feel like a god or a spirit. It felt like the city itself was speaking. "You may ask one question. Only one, and you must live its answer." Aria looked at Cale. He gave a slight nod. The wind around them stilled. The city listened. She stepped forward and asked, "What am I meant to become?" The symbols on the pedestals lit up one by one. The air vibrated. The tower behind them opened, not with doors, but with light folding inward. Aria felt herself lifted off the ground. She saw every version of herself again, but this time not as fragments, but possibilities converging. Then, a vision. She saw herself standing at the center of the world, but not as a queen or a guardian, rather, as a bridge, a living link between realities, a weaver of time and memory, one who could pull a single thread and shift the fate of empires. But with that power came one truth. Every time she used it, she would lose a part of herself, a memory, a feeling, a name. She was meant to be the one who remembered, even if it meant forgetting who she once was. The light faded. She stood once again in the city, trembling. Cale held her hand. "What did you see?" She looked at him, eyes heavy with truth. "My purpose. And its cost." The tower closed. The pedestals dimmed. The city, satisfied, began to fade. Illyrian had given its answer, but as they turned to leave, something unexpected happened. The sky cracked thin, like glass struck gently. From the crack, darkness leaked, not evil, not violent, but emptiness. A void. Something had followed them. Something that didn't belong to any timeline, any choice. It had no name, and it wanted what Aria had just seen. They had to run not just from it, but towards something new. A final path began forming beneath their feet. And the next journey, the one that would decide the fate of not just one world, but all of them, had begun. Aria and Cale stood beneath the cracked sky of Illyrian, watching as the void seeped through the fracture like black smoke in reverse. This was no shadow of memory, no remnant of past choices. This was absence itself. The city trembled. The living buildings of crystal began to dissolve into stardust. Illyrian was unmaking itself. Cale gripped Aria's hand tighter. "It's not just coming for you," he said. "It's coming for everything you've touched." Aria understood. By becoming the weaver of timelines, she had become part of the threadwork that held the worlds together. The choice she made in the tower, the question she asked had drawn the void to her. It was the cost of knowing too much. The voice of Illyrian spoke one final time. "You may leave, but the thread must be tied or severed. Choose." The sky continued cracking. The roads beneath them shifted. Cale pulled her toward a glowing archway that shimmered with threads of gold. It was a gate back home, back to Virelia, back to peace. But Aria didn't move. She looked into the void. In its depth, she saw futures, erased worlds that would never form, people that would never live, memories lost before they were made. "I can end this," she whispered. Cale shook his head. "Not by destroying yourself. No," she said. "By weaving one final thread." She walked to the center of the plaza where the pedestals had once stood. From her chest, the last remnant of the echo tree's power emerged, a glowing thread of silver, pulsing gently. It was her timeline, her soul stretched across realities. She raised her hands and whispered the names of every version of herself she had met, loved, feared, and forgiven. With each name, the thread grew brighter. Then she turned to the void. "You are what's left when we fear choice," she said. "But I remember all of them now, even the ones I never made." And with that, she cast the thread into the void. It caught. The void screamed, but not in pain. In recognition, it remembered Aria. It remembered the story. The thread began to close the crack, pulling pieces of broken reality back into place. The echoes returned. The memories. The paths. Illyrian breathed again. Cale ran to her side. She smiled, tired but whole. "Is it done?" he asked. Aria looked to the sky. "It's not unmade. It's woven." They passed through the gate, the city fading behind them like the end of a long dream. Back in Virelia, the trees were still, the air soft. The heart tree stood strong. The echo tree shimmered faintly, its roots calm. And deep beneath the soil, where no one could see, a single silver thread pulsed, anchoring the worlds, quietly holding every story ever told. Aria never became a queen or a legend. She became something far greater. The one who remembered. The one who chose. The one who ended the story by making sure it could begin again. The end.